We want to get at what science has been discovering about the brain and whether or not we can conclude or discuss the degree, if any, to which mind comes out of that brain. So let's begin with the famous experiment. When are we first conscious is what we'll begin with. How does it arise in our human lives? And we'll begin with an experiment done by a man named Gallup, I believe. And
Right, George Gallup.
Nick, you're going to help us through this one.
So you're going to see a film of a young child who's going to come up to a mirror. And Professor Gallup had come up with this very clever experiment of painting a bit of the face so that a person or an animal who would be given the paint and put in front of a mirror could find the mark on their face and try to remove it. And as you see, the child who comes up finds it and sees that there's something on their face.
What does it tell us?
So what this is supposed to be is a test of self-consciousness, that when they look in the mirror, they see that the reflection is a representation of themselves, and that representation allows them to navigate their own body to identify the change that shouldn't be there.
So that's an awareness of themselves.
Awareness of themselves and awareness of what normally they would have when they look in the mirror as a representation of themselves, and if there's something there that shouldn't be, to go investigate. And so that's the positive mirror test. Chimpanzees can do this, dolphins can do this, but interestingly, octopi can do this too. So what does that mean?
They've got something on their face, they got to
they got to do something a little different with the octopus.
But so this is the beginning in human life of self-consciousness.
It's a marker.
A marker.
And it's one that everybody sort of agrees is
At
sort
what
of
age?
an unambiguous marker at about 8 months.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that that's exactly when it begins.
Well, that's self-consciousness. So are 1-month-old babies conscious? Or, to press a political point, is the fetus conscious? What are we measuring?
So here's the result of a recent experiment by Stan Dehane and Sid Cotier, a group in France and in Denmark, who measured brain waves. This is in babies, in infants, and they equipped them with this EEG. And in adults, in fully conscious adults, there's a particular signature. You can see when I see a face, it takes my brain some time to actually perceive the face, typically 100, 150, 200 milliseconds. And there's a particular very nonlinear brain response that you can measure. In these infants, you can also measure it, but it's much delayed. If you look, they looked at 5 months, 8 months, and 12 months old. And in 5 months old, it's present, but it's much delayed. But the argument is you can begin to see it, but then by 12 months, there's a very strong, a very robust response. So what this offers, at least in principle, is a biomarker, a signature, where we can test, for example, to answer Terry's question, well, when does this start? What about a 1-month-old baby? What about a newborn baby? What about a preterm baby? Or what about a fetus? Because people have done some of this work in experimental equipped animals. I mean, not in humans, obviously, but in animals, to precisely answer the question. And there's some indication that the first moment a human will ever be conscious is when you exit from the birth canal, because before you're in the mother's womb and you're muffled, you don't breathe for yourself because your mom breathes for you, there's only very dim light, and then suddenly you're injected into the world. You have this massive surge of noradrenaline and norepinephrine, bigger than you'll ever have in the rest of your life. You have to breathe on your own. There are all these sounds, all these bright lights. And that moment, maybe the first moment when the fetus now the baby has some conscious experience. But we're going to progressively mark down that point as we get better and better tools.
So stimuli causes consciousness?
Well, in this case, it's massive change of environment from being inside the womb where you're not breathing to being injected out in the world. Your brain changes, the very circuitry of the brain. For example, many cells that are excitatory, once at that moment of birth, they change and they become inhibitory. So there are massive changes inside the brain, and that goes hand in hand. Maybe, we don't know right now, but maybe goes hand in hand with the baby actually wakes up and has some first conscious sensations.